Very
Welcome
good.
to the new normal. I'm Chris Fernandez, and the times they are changing, as Nobel Laureate Bob Dylan once sang. And with this pandemic moment, times are certainly changing very rapidly, very dramatically. But in what ways? And will the change sustain? Also, will we derive some good from it? There are many things confronting us apart from the pandemic, also inequality, racism, government ineptitude, crumbling economies, the way of life as we know it, those big questions and numerous small ones like, will I have a job, or will the industry I operate in become redundant? Will I get to grip another human being's hand and say hello? Will I get to be at a party with everyone in the same room? When will I get to eat at my favorite restaurant, or even have this conversation I'm about to have face to face? Daily stuff, the usual stuff we took for granted, has for the first time become a matter of uncertainty. So we look for answers, and I guess that's what I'm doing when I reach out to minds that have absorbed themselves with numerous questions, both before and now in this changing world. Join me on the new normal. Joining me is an author, historian who, for many of us, brings history to life and in the present. He's written numerous books and on many subjects of historical relevance: the city of jinns, on Delhi and its mixed past, the Kohinoor diamond, white Mughals, the anarchy, a book about the East India Company and its forays leading to the subjugation of India. Joining me on the new normal is William Dalrymple. Thank you, William, for joining us.
How are you, Chris? Very good to see you.
How have you been processing the last couple of months?
So I'm very positive. I mean, on a personal level, and obviously, death, destruction, earthquakes, locusts, plagues, cyclones. I mean, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse have been sighted on the ring road outside my house. But within the compound, I have to say, I've had a really lovely. I feel guilty saying this. I've had a lovely 10 weeks. I have had my family around me. I've just come back from a book tour when I was in a different bed every night for 9 months. And I don't normally get the chance to sit at home with my family. It's a huge and exciting revelation. Plus, I've got a new book I've been delving deep into, and I've been deep down the rabbit hole of the research for that. So, I mean, on a personal level, I've had the most lovely 10 weeks. I've really been the most lovely surprise that you can get 10 weeks without going out the house and enjoy it. Who knew it was possible? I mean, obviously, like you, I've been missing my favorite restaurants and I haven't seen my friends, but this is it's been like a retreat. It's been very nice.
Yeah, isolations, lockdowns is what you may describe normal working conditions for a full-time writer. Have you gotten more work done than usual? No distractions, obviously. Are you working on new material?
I'm not exaggerating. I think I've literally done twice as much work in a day as I've ever done before in my life. I mean, normally my routine is to work very hard in the morning, then do chores in the afternoon, and quite a lot, then sort of head out to see people and piss around. I mean, now I've been doing literally 2 days work in that I, go back. I have a siesta after lunch for half an hour, and then back to work until 8:30 in the evening, which I've never done in my life before. It's been a revelation. Who knew there was so much working time out there? I mean, of course, I should add, this is clearly many people have lost loved ones. Many people have been ill. The migrant labor and the entire urban underclass of this country have had a hell-like and desperate time, neglected by the government. And so I'm well aware how privileged I am, how I'm speaking from a position of great privilege. I live on a farm where I've got my own vegetables, my own goat milk and honey, and I haven't been hungry like many people have been. I haven't had to walk home like many people have had to do. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm not aware of how desperate the last 10 weeks has been for many, many people. But if you're asking me at a personal level, it's been great.
For someone like yourself who chronicles, and you've done it on so many different subjects, when you look back on this time, what will be the historical account of these times? How will we look at it?
My suspicion is that we've, in a sense, come out of a freak period. Plagues, pandemics, and illness have been part of the human story throughout our existence as a species. They've accelerated in times of globalization. When the Mongols sort of appeared on the horizon, they brought with them the Black Death. Successive plagues have followed global movements around the world. When the Europeans discovered the New World, they wiped out 2/3 of the indigenous population, not by their bullets and guns, but by the germs and the bacteria they brought with them. One of the things that emerged, we've been doing this series of Brave New World at the Jaipur Literature Festival, our online festival during the pandemic. And one of the most interesting of all the contributions was Stephen Greenblatt, the great professor of English at Harvard. And he said he'd been looking again at plague during Shakespeare's time. He's a man who studied Shakespeare all his life, written, I think, 5 books on Shakespeare. He said he'd never actually examined until this time how much or how little plague there was. You'll find the actual figures online, but from memory, I think he said that during Shakespeare's life, the globe was open, for his professional life, the globe was open for 180 months. And of that, it was closed for 40 months due to plague and different forms of pandemic illness. In other words, there is a whole and very important fact about Elizabethan England that we simply forgotten because it had ceased to affect us. This was no longer something that was part of our world. We'd edited out the business of plague and pandemic, but it was something that the Elizabethans learned to live with. It was something that was present, bouts of cholera were current in India until the 20th century. Just as famine are an element in human life that, were present all through history and suddenly ceased to be in the 20th century. I think we're probably particularly in the longer scale as antibiotics cease to operate. I think we're going back to a world that has always been there. We live on a very rough planet. Existence is precarious. War, famine, and plague are things that people have lived with since the human species evolved. And I think we've been through a holiday. We're now returning to the old norm. And the new normal is only what the human race has had for 99% of its existence. I think, in a sense, this pandemic is a freak in that it is a new species of virus. I suspect that old bugs are going to start getting us again because of the way in which we've abused antibiotics and the way bugs are now beating antibiotics, and they have out-evolved our defense mechanism. That will be a reality that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will live.
So you talk of a certain comfort has made us a little lackadaisical, if you will, and the fact that the excesses of the way we've lived our lives has also brought us to this point. You've talked about privilege earlier, and this lockdown has revealed it well, as you said, about how it's different realities for different people in this lockdown, in this pandemic, be it a matter of different rules for whites versus blacks, as these episodes in the United States are showing us, or the episode concerning Boris Johnson's aide, Dominic Cummings, or the way our labor class, our own migrant labor, has suffered so greatly in this pandemic. What are your thoughts? Because all of them seem to be coming at one particular time right now.
No, I think inequality and racism and bigotry are constants throughout human history. I don't think we're more racist than we used to be. I don't think, if anything, I think the opposite is less true. I think it's certainly true that specifically India, is going through a violently Islamophobic phase as a result of the RSS and the BJP. I think that that they've unleashed monsters of hate and educational systems that have taught people to hate Muslims, and that is now bearing fruit. You've only got to go onto Twitter and see the hatred which is being spewed. One never knows how much of it is paid by the BJP and the RSS media cells, and how much of it is just bigots let loose on Twitter. But that apart, I think, black and white, rich and poor, inequalities, they have always been there. They will always be there. We, as writers, struggle and as journalists to tell the truth and to educate people and to try and bring a little liberal civilization in our writings and our pieces and our journalism. But obviously the world is a rough, big, violent place. What one can do is really, leaves in the wind.
We're seeing so much right now. It's like, the news is entirely dominated by what's happening in the United States. There's absolute strife, there's unrest. And, you talk about strongmen, the first person that comes to mind is Trump. What are your thoughts on how this is going to shape out for the United States and the world? Because so often countries take their cues from the United States, and in terms of how their democracies measure up against the United States. What are your thoughts on what Trump and what he's doing to his country?
Well, I think that the jury is still out on whether what Trump is doing is going to finish him off and mark the end of his premiership and bring the disgrace and derision he so richly deserves, or whether this is stuff that's going to appeal to people's bigotries, their fears, make them feel they need a strong leader who brings law and order. That's certainly the gamble Trump is making. And he has shown an uncanny ability to understand the worst elements in the American people, as surely as he's misunderstood everything else, from the pandemic to everything else. I mean, he's the most fantastically ignorant, incompetent, and stupid man that's ever held that office, certainly in my lifetime. So we just don't know yet whether this, whether the hope is that around the world, the pandemic will create a two-tier system where, the competent and the incompetent, with leaders like New Zealand and even Greece at the top of the league, with sort of Trump and Boris Johnson at the bottom. How has India done? I think Modi had managed to a certain extent to keep the lid on the worst of the pandemic. India is not in the top league of sufferers from this disease by any stretch of the imagination. But of course, as we all know, he simply forgot about the urban poor. And that may well be the sting in the tail that over the next month comes to bite him and us. I mean, the reality is that India's infection rate per head is very low compared to Britain or America or many other countries in Europe. But my hope is that you will get clarity on the sort of leaders who are competent and clarity on the sort of leaders who have been grossly incompetent, like Trump. And certainly the moment when he announced we should all inject disinfectant into our veins was, one hoped, this sort of spectacular turning point where even the stupidest American could see that they had a complete moron as their president. But the opinion polls have not been as dramatically changeable as one would hope. And the reality is there's a fairly weak candidate in Joe Biden. Seeing him speak the same day that Obama has made his latest statement reminded one what an incredible leader America had with Obama, and how great his absence is on the scene now.
When you talk about the kind of reality we're grappling with, there's all the mask wearing and the sanitizing and the social distancing, and of course the fact that we connect through technology like we are right now. Do you think human beings are set to go from being social to asocial? Do you think we'll forget how to be with each other when we come out? Because when we happen to get a vaccine, and by the time it gets distributed and enough number of us are vaccinated and can go about in society, do you think that somehow we will change in some way? Will this get more deep-rooted?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would doubt it. I think that people will spring back pretty quickly into normality as long as quickly as they are able to do. Remember, there's a long history to pandemics. People have been stuck in cholera, love in the time of cholera, only set in the 19th century. It's not set in the time of Boccaccio in the 14th century. These are very recent realities that people were under quarantines and lockdowns. Humanity has survived terrible wars when no one left the house or whole populations were slaughtered. Reality, I think, reestablishes itself pretty quick. We all obsess over a bit of news like this for a period of time, but humanity is humanity. We will bounce back. My hope, obviously, and yours, is that a vaccine is produced sooner rather than later, and that social distancing and dinner parties where everyone's 6 feet apart become a reality that we learn to live with and then disappear from view. But who knows? I mean, it's too early to tell. I think the thing is to get on with our lives as best we can. In this house, I'm lucky that I'm a writer, my wife's a painter. I've got a son who's just starting a book, and another who's working on his thesis. So we're all able to get on and live our daily lives. And I'm lucky that I have a loving family and whose company I enjoy. And I'm very, very glad I'm not in a situation like so many of my friends, being a singleton, sitting in a flat, looking out the window, missing normal life. I have got company here. I've got a book to get on with, and for the time being, I can continue a measure of normality. But I think this will pass. Who knows whether it's going to take 6 months, 18 months, or a year? But we'll see.
Have you started doing anything new that you haven't done before? Do you take up a new hobby? Any DIY? I noticed that you're quite absorbed with the money heist.
That was just last night. No, I'm very much in the rhythm I am in when I write a book. I'm naturally very sociable, and I like to drink and party and get out of the house. As so many writers, one spends one's day with oneself, staring at a screen, writing, and in the evening, as you don't have an office, rather than coming home, you want to get out of home. You want to get out. So my normal reality is to go out and see my friends and go to restaurants and go to gigs and listen to concerts and all the rest of it. But in the last 10 weeks, I've just done, in a sense, the other life that I have to lead every so often, which is to write a book. And at that phase, I locked down. It's rather like doing an exam. You just get used. You've got to diet. You stop drinking. You stay in at night. You go to bed early. You get up early, and you get working. And that's the reality I've slipped into. Normally now, having just finished the book, I would take a bit of a break and be out and about a bit. But instead, I've just gone straight into the next one, which is lovely and absorbing. I'm dealing with my new subject is the diffusion of Indian ideas around Asia from the time of Ashoka onwards, the next millennium. And so it's the story of how Buddhism went from Bodh Gaya and Lumbini out to become the state religion of China, how Hinduism and Sanskrit became the language and religion of so much of Southeast Asia, from Sri Lanka and Burma through to Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, Java, Sumatra, all these countries culminating in Angkor Wat, and finally how the great Indian developments in decimal system and numerals and mathematics spread first to Baghdad, and from the Arab world to Renaissance Italy through Fibonacci, who was an Arabic speaker. He grew up in what's now Algeria, and he brought the numbering symbols invented by Ashoka to Europe, which I didn't know a year ago. And anyway, it's now the final ending of my book. So I'm deep in that and loving being deep inside this rabbit hole of history of stuff that's always interested me, which I've known very little about until 6 months ago.
The Shed, that's where, are you still writing there? Because the last I checked.
As I put out on Twitter, early in the lockdown, I looked down at what I thought it was a pile of electricity cables under my desk. It turned out to be a very large viper, which had been sitting there very, very happily, 1 foot away from my feet, for 2 hours. I must have sat there with this snake. But he went away very peaceably, slithered off, and I haven't seen him since. So that's my only lockdown adventure with, people have been celebrating on social media, dolphins returning to Venice and goats roaming around Welsh towns and so on. I've had my own little version of that, which I prefer not to repeat. But other than that, my shed has been a very nice place to hang out for the last 10 weeks.
So can we expect this book that you talk of in 2020 or 2021? Going by every indication, you have so much time on your hands.
Really, my books take 5 years, but that's when I'm out seeing my friends. I mean, at the rate we're going, quite possibly.
Of course, yes.
I definitely feel that I've done. You know, I'm at least a third of the way into the research. Definitely. And my only fear is that I won't be able to travel to go to places I'd love to see. I spent the week reading about Cambodia and Angkor Wat. I haven't been to Angkor for 10 or 15 years, and I'm now longing to travel around the country and see these spectacular Khmer temples. But who knows when we'll be able to do that.
Your last book, The Anarchy, came out 2019. If I'm not mistaken, it's been commissioned for a TV series. Is that right? Correct.
I'm not allowed to tell you the details. It is a secret. There have been various rumors which have been out in the media about who's bought it. But yeah, it's hope going to be a big budget serial of the sort that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But the details I'm unable to reveal as yet. There will be.
Yeah, but it's going to be a while, I imagine, because shootings and filming or any of that has all been put on hold, and it will be for a while. So that's a shame. We'll just go back to reading your book.
I suspect my next book will come out before the series does.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, William. It's been a pleasure talking to you for The Wire and The New Normal. Thank you, and stay sanitized and stay safe.